We had been together for 6 wonderful years when little Luna came into our lives, and I truly believed that nothing could make me happier than this moment. Mia and I had longed for a child for so long, and finally, we were parents. Mia was ecstatic. She had dreamed of being a mother for years, and to see her dreams come true was the most beautiful thing I could have imagined. But as life often does, our joy was fleeting. Just after Luna was born, things took a turn we never expected. Our little girl started to get sick frequently. It was as if her tiny body couldn't catch a break. Mia and I rushed from one hospital to another, to every private clinic we could find, desperately trying to figure out what was wrong. We felt like we were spinning in circles, never getting any closer to understanding why our baby was so ill. The stress, the worry, it began to take a toll on both of us. The last time Luna got sick, the doctors mentioned something we hadn't even considered. A blood transfusion might be necessary. Our hearts dropped at the thought. We rushed her to the emergency room, and the doctors immediately began running tests to figure out what was happening. The waiting was agonizing. Every minute felt like an eternity. After hours, the doctor finally came in, his face grim, his eyes serious. He told us the results. Luna's white blood cell count was elevated, but the rest of her blood work appeared normal. However, her red blood cell count was low, her hemoglobin levels were down, and her hematocrit was elevated. He then told us there was one more shocking detail. Her blood type wasn't what we expected. My heart stopped for a moment. I couldn't process it. Both Mia and I have type O blood, and Luna couldn't possibly have a different blood type. I interrupted the doctor, my voice shaking with disbelief. Wait a minute. Both Mia and I are type O. That doesn't make sense, does it? You must have made a mistake, I said, my mind racing with confusion. I turned to Mia, needing some kind of confirmation, but the moment I saw her, I knew something was terribly wrong. The color drained from her face, and her skin turned as pale as a ghost. Her body seemed to lose all its strength as she slumped against the wall. She slowly slid to the floor, her knees buckling beneath her. It was as though she couldn't hold herself up any longer. She looked like she had just received some kind of devastating blow. I'm just worried, Mia said, her voice trembling with fear. I just need a moment, some fresh air. She shakily stood up, trying to steady herself, and made her way toward the exit. I watched her go, helpless. As they took Luna for an ultrasound, I knew I couldn't just sit there. Not while Mia was in that state. I followed her outside, stepping into the cool night air, where the dim glow of the streetlights cast long shadows over the parking lot. Mia was standing there, looking so fragile, almost doll-like, with her skin pale and drawn. The tears were streaming down her face, and I knew that even though she appeared so delicate, she was still very much alive and feeling everything. I couldn't bear seeing her like this. I walked over to her and wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, trying to offer whatever comfort I could. Mia, I whispered, my voice steady even though inside, I was terrified. Our little girl is the strongest fighter I know. She's going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. But Mia was inconsolable. She buried her face in my chest, her sobs breaking through the quiet night. Her voice was cracked and raw, as she repeated, I'm so sorry, over and over, as if the weight of some unspoken guilt was crushing her. It took several minutes for Mia to calm down enough to speak again. When she finally did, her voice was different. It wasn't the voice of the woman I had known, the woman who had always been there for me. It was quiet, detached, almost as if she had distanced herself from everything that had come before. It was as if she had drawn a clear line between the before and the after, as if everything had changed in that moment. I don't even know how to start, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I messed up, Carter. I was wrong. Do you remember last summer? At the company's anniversary party at Averse Cottage? You said you weren't feeling well. You said you were bored, stuck talking to all those people in ties. I got so angry, so frustrated with you. We argued for what felt like hours, and you left. You just walked away, and I was left there all alone, surrounded by couples. I tried to ignore it, but the loneliness was unbearable. It hit me like a wave, and I couldn't escape it. So I drank. At first, it was just wine, but when that ran out, I switched to cognac. I probably had too much. The last thing I remember is stumbling inside to wash up and catch my breath. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The confession was unexpected, and the weight of it settled on my chest like a heavy stone. I could feel the tension in the air, the rawness of her vulnerability, and I understood that this moment would change everything between us. But as Mia stood there, her shoulders trembling, I realized that, for better or worse, this was part of our story now. And somehow, we would have to find a way to move forward together. She spoke softly, her voice trembling with every word. "I think I was going to call a cab," she whispered, her eyes staring into nothingness as if the memory was too much to bear. But my head, it was spinning. I couldn't think straight, couldn't even walk properly. My shoes, they were covered in mud, and I kept tripping, stumbling over nothing. I couldn't keep myself together. She paused, the weight of the memories pressing down on her. And then I remember Maverick from the next apartment. He was the last person I saw before everything went black. He paid the driver, shoved cash at him without saying a word, and then slammed the car door shut. The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, as if she were trying to make sense of it all. When I woke up, I was in my apartment. You were already asleep, as if nothing had happened, but I was disoriented. I could barely remember how I got there. I just stumbled to the bathroom to wash off the stench of alcohol and cigarettes. I couldn't stand the smell. It was like it was clinging to me, suffocating me. And that's when I noticed my skirt, it was inside out, and my underwear was gone. Her voice dropped to a whisper, as though afraid of speaking the truth aloud. Her eyes welled with tears, but she didn't wipe them away. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to ignore what was happening, but deep down I knew. I had a feeling. There were always rumors about Maverick, you know? People always said he didn't care who he was with, as long as they were there for him. He wasn't loyal. He didn't care about anyone, and it made him dangerous, unpredictable. And now, I'm living with the consequences of that. She choked on the words, her breath catching in her throat. She tried to continue, but the anguish overwhelmed her. The nausea rose, and it seemed as if it would swallow her whole. She took a few deep breaths, struggling to regain control, but it was too much. The words couldn't form anymore. The weight of her confession settled heavily in my chest. I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat was suffocating, each breath more difficult than the last. The shock, the hurt, the betrayal, it was too much to take in. It felt as if the very air had been knocked from my lungs. My entire world felt like it was collapsing around me, and all I could do was sit there in silence, trying to comprehend what had just been said. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I was utterly alone. My wife was gone. My daughter was gone. The woman I loved, the family I thought I had shattered in front of me, and all I was left with was the emptiness of betrayal. I couldn't bring Mia and the baby home from the hospital. I couldn't face the truth that was staring me in the face. I learned painfully that Maverick had indeed slept with my wife. That kind of betrayal, it wasn't something I could ever forgive. It gnawed at me day and night, like a wound that wouldn't heal. We tried to hold things together for another month, pretending we could move past it, but it was impossible. The resentment, the pain, the distrust, it was all consuming. Eventually, we both realized that staying together would only make things worse. We agreed that divorce was the only option, even though it felt like tearing apart a piece of my soul. Mia insisted on getting a paternity test. She wanted the truth, even though Maverick kept denying everything. He denied that anything had happened between them, even though the evidence was undeniable. It was clear, even from the outside, that Maverick had a fiancée waiting for him at home. The paternity test results came back, and while no one was shocked by the outcome, it was still a blow to the heart. The one person I thought I could trust, the one person I thought would never betray me, had done so without a second thought. And his fiancée, well, she wasn't as forgiving as I had hoped. She couldn't forgive him for what he had done. How could she? Who could forgive a man who fathered a child with someone else? The last I heard, Maverick and Mia were trying to salvage whatever they could of their relationship, but it was obvious to everyone that things were far from easy. Maverick was attempting to step up, to play the part of the father, even going as far as registering the child under his name. But it was clear he hadn't fully embraced the responsibility. He wasn't ready to accept the child as part of his life, and that was a pain that no amount of time could heal. You asked me what happened to you, what happened to us, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Why did life deal me such a hand? Why did fate choose this path for me? What did I do to deserve this? But one thing, one painful truth, I've learned for sure. When a woman is drunk, she is no longer the mistress of her own body. She is vulnerable in ways she cannot control. And in that moment, when I learned what had happened, I felt every ounce of that vulnerability, not just for her, but for myself as well.